Welcome to the Culture and Arts Podcast. This is episode... What episode is it?
Episode 12.
Episode 12. That's right. We're on our 12th episode. And last week on the show, we had David with no Jason. And this week we have Jason with no David.
Yeah, I'm sitting in his seat.
Oh, the chair that he normally broadcasts from.
Yes.
When is it going to be back to the triangle? I feel like we keep missing an angle.
I feel like next week everything will be back in place.
It's going to be the week?
I feel like it.
The hot fronts and the cold fronts and everything that kind of bring the universe together here at the Culture and Arts Podcast will finally return to its normal order.
The triumvirate of awesome.
And David is gone tonight, and you guys might be interested in this because, I know David's having quite the day, the rite of passage as a father.
Yes.
And David's daughter is currently going to her prom. And from what I understand, there was a boy who she liked who flew in to go to prom with her. Is that right?
I think so.
Okay. And as a father, I can understand how David, or at least I assume he would be like, looking at the whole situation kind of sideways. You want to be supportive. You want to be there. You want to kind of relish in this big moment in your daughter's life. And at the same time, you don't want your daughter to go out and date.
I'm assuming he's home, making sure the gun is loaded just in case there's an issue.
That's what it is. He's making sure that the GPS tracker he put on the bottom of the young man's rental car is perfectly calibrated.
He's got more spy equipment on her than the NSA right now.
The NSA stands for the No Sex Agency anyways.
Yes.
So, David's going to kill me now. And someday I'm going to have this paid back to me in tenfold.
Definitely.
It's my kid, right? But you know what, Jason, last week when you were gone and when David was here, we talked about we ran the gamut of things that happened while we were away. And that included the death of the Ultimate Warrior, which I'm sure you'd heard of.
Yes.
And that included Colbert taking over for David Letterman.
Yeah, it killed me not to jump in on that one.
Well, go ahead and share your quick thoughts if you had some things that you wanted to say.
Well, I know you guys were talking about, how do you compete with Fallon, and I don't think it's a situation where CBS needs to find the guy that's going to beat Fallon in the ratings, because you're not going to find somebody who's better at what Jimmy Fallon does than what Jimmy Fallon.
Agreed.
Okay, so what they have to do is find the best person to take Letterman's place on The Late Show, which is probably just a slightly different style of comedy than what Fallon's doing. Fallon's very safe. He's not going to offend anyone, and he is talented, no question. Letterman likes to poke the bear a little bit, kind of rub people the wrong way occasionally, and there's an element of that to Colbert, maybe not to the same degree. I remember there was one time he had like an extreme environmentalist on his show, so he ran the microwave in the background just to waste electricity, that kind of thing. And so I think he's a good replacement for that style of humor.
Well, do you think that there was that big of a difference between Jay Leno and David Letterman, though? Because I always saw them as kind of two different teams that play the same sport.
I think there is a difference because, especially in the early days, Leno never really offended people. There were people that didn't like him because, he wasn't especially funny. Mm-hmm. But there are people that legitimately dislike David Letterman. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference because he had more of an edge to him. And, I remember in the 80s when he was on NBC, Cher went on a show and said, the first time she did, she said, I never wanted to do this show because I always thought you were an a-hole. Fallon and Leno aren't going to get that response from people.
Calling the kettle black a little bit there with Cher.
Probably so. But.
So you think Colbert is probably the best replacement, kind of like David did?
Yes.
Okay. And as far as the Ultimate Warrior went, did you have anything that you were, any thoughts?
I was never the Ultimate Warrior guy that you guys were, apparently. I mean, that feud with Hogan is maybe one of the top 3 feuds in wrestling history. I mean, it's up there. But I just don't think he was good enough for a long enough amount of time for me to really put him in like one of my all-time favorites. But yeah, that run he had against Hogan was obviously, a great stretch.
Gotcha. And then we talked about Michael Jackson coming out with a new album.
The one thought I had about that was I remember I heard an interview with Slash from Guns N' Roses many years ago when they released some Beatles stuff that never got released. And he had said, I'm kind of a pack rat. I don't throw anything out. But if something gets released after I'm dead, I'm going to be furious about it.
Right.
And I don't know if this is stuff that Michael would even want on the market.
Yeah.
And I just feel like they're taking advantage of him.
That's kind of what we said where, the estate was trying to make a little bit more money off his legacy and that kind of thing. Now, Slash, if he's furious, but he's dead...
Maybe he comes back to haunt somebody. I don't know how much he could do. But
he's going to come back and start his own... It'll be the Ungrateful Dead.
There you go.
But this week, we, moving on past last week, I guess that's old business. Now we get on to new business. You've been kind of back and forth between Indianapolis, South Bend, and everything. Any update on how all that's going?
I guess Friday they're going to do a test on Mom, and if that goes well, she may be home very soon. She's technically out of the hospital. They just want her near Indy for a couple days, and we're about halfway through that 30 days that they wanted to keep an eye on her. So hopefully she'll be home soon.
So things are looking up.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Wow, we've just kind of breezed through the first few moments of the Culture and Arts podcast. We've made haste, and now we are moving on to even more speed.
Yes.
Because we have a need. So you tagged David and I on an article this week. And, usually when you tag us on an article, it means this is something that we have to discuss.
Yes.
And if you see the picture, it just looks like this zany Occupy Wall Street person with like a Fresh Prince of Bel-Air Afrocentric jacket on, but he's a white kid with some aviators, and he's holding up a copy of Speed, the movie with Keanu Reeves.
A VHS copy.
A VHS copy, which who even has a VHS player anymore?
Right.
And he's holding it up like it's his battle axe. Fiercely, proud. He is excited that he owns what appears to be a stack of Speed VHSs that probably stack up about as high as Obamacare legislation.
It's over 500 copies. And the article even mentions that he has, I believe it was 26 copies on Laserdisc, but he doesn't count that as part of the collection because he uses those when he needs to trade for more VHS copies.
So it's like his own currency.
Yeah, his goal is to collect every VHS copy of the movie Speed that exists.
He's got as many pictures of Keanu Reeves in his house as probably Keanu Reeves' mother.
Right. Yeah, he refers to it as the World Speed Project. And he keeps them in a bus, and he's trying to raise money.
The WSP, of course.
Yeah, I think he has a Kickstarter campaign going so he can raise enough money to, A, get insurance on the van so he can drive it around and show off his copies, and B, he wants to renovate it so it looks like the bus from Speed.
Now, when he drives his van around with these VHS tapes, does he have to maintain a certain miles per hour?
Well, I think he has to actually keep it below 35 miles an hour so he doesn't draw attention to the fact that he has no insurance.
Now, can you imagine a police officer pulling this guy over and, maybe it's one of those kind of abuse of power type police officers that looks at this guy and makes some sort of uninformed judgment, and he says, all right, I'm going to need you to step out of the car so I can take a look. The guy doesn't exercise any rights. He doesn't ask for a warrant or anything like that. So he starts letting the cop snoop around. And the cop finds 500 copies of Speed on VHS. Now, the cops have probably pulled some people over and found Speed before, but I don't think that's the kind that they usually hijack.
Right. This isn't necessarily illegal contraband.
This is not.
It said he started this. He bought 6 copies for his family as Christmas gifts because he was poor, didn't have any money to get anything else, so he thought it'd be funny if they all opened the same gift and he could just say, well, I love you all equally. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, he just started buying every copy he could get his hands on because he just thought it was cool to own that many copies of the same thing.
Which, in my mind, is not cool at all.
Yeah, he seems to think it's some sort of anti-capitalism stance that he's taking because he feels like if he's going to this much effort to collect something that is absolutely worthless, that's anti-capitalism.
Which kind of establishes some value for him personally, and then it makes it completely capitalist.
Yeah, and he says if it costs more than $4, he just steals it. Which,
Stop that man! He's taken our copy of Speed on VHS.
He said he stopped at a pawn shop and he saw they had 30 copies, so they sold them all 30 copies. 30 copies, and so he bought them all for like 11 cents each.
Wow. Yeah. If you see the picture, and if you were to Google this article from Vice.com, and if you were to look at this picture of the inside of this man's Speedwagon, not Ario, But it has all of these copies just kind of scattered, and it looks like one of those Febreze commercials where they put a bunch of trash in a vehicle and then they spray some Febreze and they put in the blind scent testers to see if they smelled trash or Febreze. And they were always like, and I call bull on those commercials every time because I'm like, they would totally smell the trash. But anyway, that's what the inside of this car looks like. He doesn't have any system of organization for these VHS tapes. They're all just thrown around as if he'd stacked them up loosely on the seats and then taken some sharp turns.
They're basically like sitting in, buckets.
Well, this man is probably the zaniest cat that we've had on the show since the Stinky Man or since Todd Fox.
Yeah.
And we'd encouraged people last week to go through some of the archives. So if you don't recognize them names and you are, tuning in to the Cap for the first time, go back and listen to those because there's some entertaining things that we've discussed. And this man, let's name him so he can live on in infamy. His name is Ryan Beats.
Ryan Beats.
Ryan Beats. He is the Sultan of Speed.
The Sultan of Speed.
Yes,
I like that.
We're going to go with that.
Now, if you find the article, it does have the address at the bottom if you'd like to donate to the World Speed Project.
If you just happen to have a VHS of Speed
yes,
sitting around the house that you would like to send to Ryan Beats. He's the chairman.
And the guy that wrote the article, he posted it as an interview, and at one point he asked about his commitment to uselessness. and he said, how would you even know that you've owned them all? There's no way to know that. And he said, well, it's kind of like if somebody says, well, it's impossible to make the world completely peaceful, so I won't try. Well, I'm going to try. He feels that strongly in this cause.
This man most likely smokes copious amounts of weed. You can see that when you look at the picture.
I'm not sure what to make of his hair.
He kind of looks like Russell Brand starring in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Yeah, and the hair's kind of like tied up on top, almost.
Keanu Reeves would not approve. And yet, you know what? He's probably happy that somewhere out there his movies are being put to, would you call that good use?
At least somebody wants to own it.
Somebody wants to own it, yeah. It's not like, the Matrix trilogy. But moving on, since we're talking about arts and entertainment and we're kind of on movies and TV and film, that's kind of going to be the theme of today's show. Another article that you posted on our wall, you really picked the topics this week, man.
Yes, I did.
I'm grateful for that.
Well, you can tell I haven't been here in a while because I'm really amped up. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this.
And that's good. That's good. That's less work that the rest of the crew has got to do, and David can go off and get his shotgun cleaned and stuff in peace. And there might be a Lost reboot, Lost the TV series, in the works, according to ABC.
Yeah, now, I know you're a huge fan of Lost.
I am I guess they would call us Losties.
Yeah, I have kind of a weird relationship with the show because the first episode I watched was the finale.
Oh, that was a terrible way to go.
I watched it from like a TV history standpoint because I love TV. I knew it would be significant. And fortunately, I even watched like the pre-show where they kind of recapped the previous seasons, or I would have been completely confused.
Yeah.
And so I thought, man, this is good. I really ought to go back and watch everything. So then I rented the DVDs and watched it season by season. And yeah, it's a great show.
It's a great show. I mean, there was just so much to it. And I have to tell you, when I worked at my last job, there would be downtimes where we would have nothing going on. And I can say that now that I no longer work there.
Right.
But there would be periods of time when we had nothing going on during the third shift. And on those nights when we were alone and didn't have a lot of work going on, and we're just doing the bare minimum to get by, we would shoot through episodes of Lost. And I must have showed the entire series to at least 4 people within the duration of my tenure at that job. But yeah, I mean, it was just the absolute greatest show. My wife and I loved it so much that we got married on the island where they filmed and took a Lost Hummer tour of the set on our honeymoon.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I mean, you know that you're a geek for a show when it's, and I really mean it when I say that this is the greatest show that has ever been on television. It is like a sore Peter or a broke drum. You can't beat it, right? That's the old line from Jim Cornette. He's a wrestling icon. And this is something that they are talking about, or at least some people are talking about, potentially bringing back.
I'm not sure how necessary it is to bring it back, but I will say this. Lost really did change television, because there's been a lot of shows since Lost has went off the air that have kind of tried to get that formula where there's this big mystery at the beginning and they're trying to figure out what's happened, and nothing's been able to even.
And most of them get canceled.
Most of them don't last.
There was
very
one
long.
shortly after. I think it was called The Event.
Yeah, The Event. Revolution kind of has a similar thing, and a lot of people are predicting it's not going to come back next year. There's been a lot of that.
And anytime you hear someone, like, they'll bring out J.J. Abrams' name at the beginning of the TV when they're teasing the show.
Right.
And they'll say, from the creator of Lost.
Right.
And they'll try and give it a little bit of oomph right off the bat that way. They did it with Fringe, although Fringe, I think, lasted beginning to end, or they ended it on the note that they wanted to.
Yeah, I think it got 5 years, 6 years maybe?
Yeah, which is not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad. I mean, anything beyond that, for the most part, and you're kind of on borrowed time.
Yeah, but I guess if you're trying to recreate that formula, bring back the show. But I just, it's unlikely that any of the cast is going to want to do it.
Right.
I mean, it's lightning in a bottle. You're not going to bring that magic back.
Right. Yeah, I really doubt that any of the cast would be willing, because they're going to look at it as, we told the story from beginning to end, and this show is kind of a legacy at this point. And anything that we were to come in and do after the fact would compromise it.
Right.
And they wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to do it if I were one of the actors. Carlton Cuse, who's one of the executive producers, said he wouldn't be back either.
Right, and for the reasons that you mentioned, he said, we told the story we wanted to tell.
Mm-hmm. And, some people weren't happy with the way that it ended. Some people were happy.
I know a lot of people.
I was specifically, I thought it was the best way they could have done it. I can't imagine, there were so many things at the time you couldn't get online without some sort of theory.
Right.
There was a lot of speculation about how it was going to be ended, what route they were going to take, and people were talking about aliens. And I always think of the History Channel meme when I hear the word aliens with
right.
that guy with the crazy hair. And but either aliens or they were talking about them all, being dead or something like that. And, that kind of, it's like they almost used that, but they made it a little bit different. They broadened it a bit.
One thing I loved about the show, though, is there were things that were mentioned, like in Season 1, that really never got explained, but they had to have that until the very end.
Mm-hmm.
But they had to have that in mind the whole time. It wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't like they were just making it up on the fly.
Right. And there were some bumps in the road. Like I think Walt was supposed to be a bigger character than he was. Mm-hmm. He was the little boy, but then he grew up too quick. He hit puberty, and all of a sudden he was kind of a man at that point. Mm-hmm. He had a real deep voice, and you couldn't use him in the creepy kid character. So it was either choose another actor and keep writing it as they had anticipated they were going to, or tweak the story a little bit. And I think that's what they went for. And they brought him back for like a special clip in the DVD special features, which gave a little bit of insight into where he was at. But for the most part, they ended the Walt storyline.
I might watch it, but if it didn't hook me in almost immediately, I might not make it for the second episode.
You'd be really skeptical, right?
Yeah.
And I think everybody would. It'd be, you'd be watching something, but it would be like the equivalent of, seeing a rock star, like seeing Rod Stewart at his current age go out on stage shirtless singing, "If you want my body and you think I'm sexy, why don't you just let me know?" Because, in the 70s, he could do that, and some might call him a sex symbol for that time. In 2014...
Now that he's in his 70s.
Yeah, that would not be the case. And I think that there are some things that have to be let to die, so that we can remember them the way that they were intended to be remembered.
Sometimes when you get it right, you just need to let it go.
Yeah.
And the tendency is when they get it right, they want to cash in and expand on it, and it's just not the same.
Mm-hmm. Now, to go a different direction, when the show Heroes was on NBC, that show didn't really get a fair chance, I thought. And now they're talking about bringing that back. And I'm almost excited about that coming back, because I'm like, all right, now we're going to get the show that we were supposed to get. Whereas with Lost, we got the show we were supposed to get. So anything else might damage it. I feel like Heroes could maybe improve.
I would agree with that, because I think with Lost, I don't know how many questions are left to ask.
Yeah.
I feel like they got everything.
I thought they did too. But there were people who were like, I still had questions.
Yeah, I know there's some.
I'm like, man, what did you want to know? The color of Jack's underwear or what?
I know. But like with Heroes, this is going to sound crazy. It got so all over the place at times. Mm-hmm. That it kind of left you disappointed. And so maybe if they bring it back, even though it's supposedly going to be completely new characters and everything, maybe they could get it right.
Well, wait, they're not bringing back the cast?
No.
The original cast?
No. There might be some cameos, but...
That would be nice if there were some cameos.
Yeah.
You know, I recently saw the guy that played Nathan Petrelli was part of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes.
And he looked really funny. He had this, like, dark tan and this,
He's got, like,
pencil...
the mustache.
This, like, dirt mustache that's penciled in. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. Like, he is... He looked Saudi Arabian or something.
Yeah.
But Nathan Petrelli looked really funny. I mean, he almost looked comical, and that's fine. I mean, it's Marvel. It's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, the character was very small. It seemed to work out. He's not going to be recurring that you know of, is he?
We might see him periodically. I don't think it would be a regular character, but that is a guy that was actually in the comics.
So Heroes was plagued, I thought, because they had a really fantastic first season. I mean, it was good.
Oh, yeah.
And my wife and I were into it. Second season, I think that there was a short season because of the writer's strike.
I think so.
That was going on at the time. And then they ended up changing. It was either writers or producers or somehow Tim Kring, who was like the mastermind behind it all, was no longer involved. And so the rest of season 2 and season 3, I think he wasn't involved in it. The show just went weird places, and they brought in a bunch of new characters, and nobody knew what was going on. And then the very last season, Tim Kring came back, and I think it was 4 or 5. I'm not sure.
I think 4.
Okay. And I actually thought that as that season progressed, the show got better again, and it got almost to the point where it was mirroring season 1. And then at the end of the season, Hayden Panettiere's character, she kind of came out to the world and showed everybody, we're this group of people that have these powers. And then you knew from that point on that the show was going to be somewhat resembling of like X-Men.
Right.
Where it was, Magneto and, the whole, can the world live with these people who have these specific gifts? And I was really excited and really interesting to find out if the world could live with that. And I never got to find out.
Well, because that's also it was kind of a theme in the first season. You knew who the good guys were. Yeah. And you knew who the bad guys were, and you kind of sensed, well, maybe one day this could end up being like an X-Men to that extent. And then, like, season 2 came along, just the lines got real blurry. You didn't know who to root for. They even flirted with making Sylar a likable guy for a while.
They tried to make him likable.
And it's just Sylar was just such a great villain.
He was so evil,
yes.
Like within the first season or so, and then all of a sudden he's. It was like they kind of watered him down. There was a different villain each season. He was doing things or running storylines where he was on the same side as, like, Hero.
Yeah, and he was, like, buddy-buddy with Peter for a while.
Yeah,
that's like, you can't have that.
You can't have that. And, what do you think about this, where they're bringing back all these TV shows that, aside from Lost and Heroes being 2 of the big names, those are not the only shows that seem to be making a comeback. Dallas did it.
24's coming back soon.
24?
I was a huge fan of. I'm going to watch it. I just don't know how necessary it is to bring it back. But I know part of what's going on with 24 was there was supposed to be a movie made after they stopped doing the TV show. Things didn't work out with that, so I think they're trying this to see if there's still an audience there. There's a lot of shows that they're recycling the titles.
Right. I heard that they were going to use Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo to make a National Lampoon's sitcom.
I've heard that's in the works. Apparently there's another CSI on the way.
Yeah, another CSI or a spinoff of CSI.
Something
which
like that.
Aren't they all spinoffs?
To me, they are.
And then there's NCIS New Orleans. And we've talked about these crime drama shows before
yes.
on the Culture and Arts podcast and how ridiculous they've become. So we are still waiting for NCIS in space, CSI in the hood, and that kind of Leprechaun-esque stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. You mentioned The Odd Couple might even be a show that they're going to bring back.
CBS... I don't know how far they've gotten with it, but there's a chance, and I think Matthew Perry's going to be on it, and that's a guy who's just not had a lot go his way since Friends went off the air.
He sure hasn't.
No.
Another one is How I Met Your Dad, which is a spinoff of How I Met Your Mother, and now that How I Met Your Mother has ended, which, the ending could have been better. A lot of people were really, really angry about it, and now they're bringing in How I Met Your Dad.
Yeah, and Meg Ryan's going to do the voiceovers like Bob Saget did.
She's going to be the Bob Saget of the show.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's this actress named Greta Gerwig that is going to play the main character, and they keep, talking about her as though people should know who she is. Do you know who she is?
It's one of those names that just gets thrown out there a lot. It's like,
I don't know who she is, and yet
No.
they keep telling me I should know. But sorry, Greta Gerwig, I just don't know who you are. But I will watch How I Met Your Dad. I was a big fan of How I Met Your Mother, and I will at least give it a shot and see where it goes.
Now, one thing on this list that did catch my eye just now is the Untitled Jim Gaffigan project.
Uh-huh.
Jim Gaffigan could pull in an audience.
Now, do you know that Jim Gaffigan is from our area?
Is he really?
Well, I don't know if he's from the area, but he did go to Lallamere School, which is like in New Carlisle, Rolling Prairie area. It's a really nice school from what I understand. But yeah, I guess him and his brothers went there.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so a little bit of trivia there about Jim Gaffigan, the comedian. And have you heard of any other shows that are going to be... Oh, Supernatural.
Oh, yeah, they're getting a spinoff, which is... I never watched Supernatural, so I can't imagine I'm going to watch a spinoff.
So my wife and I are Supernatural fans. We were more so at the beginning than we are now. But yeah, they're giving us the spinoff while Supernatural is still running. So they're kind of doing like Private Practice was a spinoff to Grey's Anatomy while it was still in production.
Right.
And then Private Practice ended up being canceled before Grey's Anatomy. Same thing with Once Upon a Time. The show seemed to be having a little success. They went on and did the spinoff Once Upon a Time in Wonderland, and that is now being canceled also.
Well, like I was saying, when something works, they want to cash in.
Right.
And sometimes you can have too much of it.
And you would think that they would lose money in those little endeavors.
Yeah.
So let's just not get greedy, folks, I guess is the moral of the story here.
Yeah. I just don't know what it is about network TV. They don't seem to want to take chances and come out with original shows.
No. And not only that, but they, I guess people would say that the market's competitive and that network schedules are really competitive. But I'm telling you, man, if you ever turn it to the Spanish channels, those shows, those variety shows and those soap operas will go on for like years and years and years. And people just expected that if a show starts, that is going to be on for a while, and that's going to be, something that they can sit down and watch, and it won't change. So either love it or hate it. With the shows that they put out now, it's like I almost can't watch a show until it's been on the air for 3 years because I'm afraid that I'll get into it and it'll get canceled. I
mean, how much difference can there be between NCIS, NCI Los Angeles, and NCIS New Orleans?
Las Vegas and
can they be
Los
that
Angeles
different? Can they be that much different?
They can't be. And you'd think that they would rehash kind of the same crimes or the same storylines over a certain period of time too. They change the characters and everything, but what could really change? How many things can they come up with?
I don't know.
There's more than one way to skin a cat, but there's not an infinite amount of ways to skin a cat.
Right. Eventually you run out of cat.
I mean, where do we go? I guess they seem to be at a little bit of a stalemate where they're like, they've got the Untitled Jim Gaffigan project, the Untitled Jeff Lowell project, or the Untitled Kevin Hart project. And it's like, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to take an up-and-coming person who's kind of popular and on an upswing here in Hollywood. We're going to give them a show. I don't know what we're going to call it. I don't know what it's going to be about. But we're going to give them a show, and that's going to draw ratings. Where are the writers?
I don't know. But see, the thing is, if you've watched the Emmys in the last several years, it seems like all the shows that are getting nominated for awards are on cable.
Right.
It's like I haven't seen most of the Emmy winners because I don't have HBO.
Yeah, that's true. There's some really great shows on cable. There's, The Walking Dead is a huge hit.
That's a huge show. Breaking Bad was huge.
It was huge, yeah. Game of Thrones is really big right now. True Blood was for a season, but now it's on the outs. What else? Dexter was really big. Sons of Anarchy is really big.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but none of those are on ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox, or the CW.
Because it's just like they're not willing to take a chance.
Right. And if you've ever watched the show Episodes, you probably haven't seen it because it's on Showtime. The whole thing centers around the guy who played Joey on
Matt
Friends.
LeBlanc.
Yeah, and he plays himself. So he plays Matt LeBlanc in the show.
Okay.
And basically they put him on this, they take this British sitcom that was really popular over in the UK, and they bring it to Los Angeles to try and create an Americanized version of it, and they bring the writers over. But as the writers are trying to recreate the show, the network keeps making changes. Like it was about a sophisticated school professor and his classmates and the people who he was trying to teach, his pupils. And then they're like, no, we need someone that's just a little bit younger and a little bit cooler. And next thing you know, the professor becomes Matt LeBlanc. And they're like, this whole school and the pupils thing is just really not cool. We want something that's going to be a little bit more hip that people can appreciate. So what if it's like a sports team and a coach? And Matt LeBlanc's like, nobody's doing hockey. We could do hockey. And they're like, yeah, we'll do hockey. So you'll be a hockey coach, and then these guys will be your kids on your hockey team. And Matt LeBlanc's like, well, we could call it pucks. And so this show that they brought these writers all the way over from the UK and they contracted them to reproduce this show called Lyman's Boys about this elderly professor and his pupils. And all of a sudden it's Matt LeBlanc with a hockey team, and the show is called Pucks.
It reminds me of Ricky Gervais had a show on HBO called Extras, where he was like a character actor, like a background actor, and then he gets a big break on a sitcom, and he's trying to make it, something special. It's got a lot of thought into it, and the network keeps trying to dumb it down to get a mass appeal.
Yeah.
He's like, he doesn't want to do a catchphrase, but they make him say his catchphrase. Are you having a laugh? And they make him put on the stupid wig and glasses. And it's like every time he talks to somebody, it's like he tries, if he tries to sell that, he's trying to do a credible sitcom, they're into the dumb humor. And if he tries to say, oh, I'm on this dumb show, they're like, oh, how can you do that crap?
Right. And so on episodes, though, they ended up getting the show canceled because they were competing against a show about, what was it, a talking dog or some real cutesy family show, and they were like, we just can't beat the talking dog in this time slot. And so they worked for it for a little while, and then maybe a year into the show, the network was like, oh, we're pulling the show over to Saturday nights. So the actors were like, Saturday nights, there's really no competition, so this might actually be a good move for us. People might actually watch. And then nobody watched, and it ended up being reruns of something else that got higher ratings than this show, and so they inevitably just canceled the show. That is so true about the way that networks seem to run their television shows.
Right.
Invest in something real. Like when I heard with Lost that the guy who was initially in charge approved for them to do the crash scene at the beginning with the plane, and apparently had spent so much money on that scene, that one scene in the pilot episode, that the network fired him. Well, lo and behold, this investment pays off, and Lost becomes one of the most successful TV franchises ever on TV. And it's because they took a leap, and they actually invested something into it. That doesn't happen very often.
No. I mean, every once in a while, you got to take a gamble.
Yeah. And then you have to stay consistent. So my advice to you, Hollywood people in your boardrooms with your suit and ties who are discussing the next big show, two things. You should invest in something that you feel like, you're going to take a chance on, something that's that good. Market the heck out of it like you do all of your shows that last for 2 months. And then, after all that, make sure you stay consistent so you don't go the route of Heroes. Or there was a show that Spielberg was going to produce called Terra Nova. Remember that?
Yeah.
Terra Nova had this huge pilot, and then it looked like it was going to be an amazing show. And then a few episodes in, they started making it more like ABC Family or more child-oriented, I guess.
Yeah.
And it really watered down all the crazy stuff they did in the first episode, and so they canceled it after season 1. You have to stay consistent. You have to have a vision for what you're going to put out there.
And sometimes you just have to be patient with the show, because a lot of times if it doesn't do well after an episode or two, they'll pull the plug, and a lot of times you got to give it time to develop and grow an audience.
Now, I am assuming that when you say that, you're referring to Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
It actually wasn't what I was thinking of, but it's a good example.
Because, and I think, you might be right. I quit watching Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I was like one of the people who were most excited about it.
Yeah.
After the Avengers came out, and I was all over social media talking about, yes, Marvel's going to have their own TV show. This is going to be sweet. And 4 episodes in, I quit watching.
I feel like I owe Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. an apology. Because I was very critical, because after... I like the first couple episodes. It kind of went downhill, and I started saying that it was probably a mistake to tie it into the movie universe because it kind of tied their hands on using real comic book characters. But now seeing how it's all connected, especially if you've seen The Winter Soldier, there's a payoff there. So maybe I was wrong.
I have not yet seen The Winter Soldier, but I am now that I've gone back to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and kind of updated myself. The last 4 episodes or so have been pretty awesome.
Yeah.
They've been pretty good. And bringing Bill Paxton to the cast made a big difference as far as I was concerned, because he's not famous enough that he's everywhere.
Right.
But he's had a very consistent career, and he's a very good actor.
And without giving anything away, if you see The Winter Soldier, there's a lot of things in that movie that tie it to everything else in the Marvel Universe, which, like Iron Man 3 was really kind of just Iron Man 3. That didn't really tie to the Avengers or anything else too much.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that this ties to.
Well, he had like post-traumatic stress from New York, and they kept referring to that. So it did have some tie-in.
It had a little bit, but when you see The Winter Soldier, you're going to see a lot.
Okay.
But actually, the show I was thinking of was actually Cheers back in the day.
Really?
Yeah, because Cheers, when it debuted, I think its first episode was like second to last in the ratings. And if you do that nowadays, you get canned immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But they stuck with it and ended up winning, or at least getting nominated for Best Comedy its first year, even though nobody was watching it. Next thing you know, it's on for 10 more years.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes if you can just give a show time, things can work out.
I think so, too. But do you think that people have such a short attention span that they're not willing to dedicate time and focus to seeing if something improves like that?
That's a good point.
And I think that's where the network's coming from, but there's got to be like a happy medium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there was a show a year or two ago called Awake on NBC about a guy that when he went to sleep at night, basically he was a cop. There was an accident, and like when he went to sleep at night, he was still awake in his head, and his son was alive. But then when he woke up in the morning, his wife was dead, and there was an accident with his son and his wife. And like when he was sleeping, one was alive. When he was awake, the other was alive.
So it's kind of like a parallel universe or storyline or something.
And I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah,
but
that's a cool concept.
It really did borderline, so they got rid of it. Half a season,
and they keep pushing one on ABC now about some doctor who it's a female doctor who has some sort of
black box.
Yeah. And they're marketing it hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I just look at that and I'm like, that one's not going to last very long.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to go anywhere. Believe they thought that was going to be really big, and they marketed that hard. Now it looks like that's going to go away.
Right.
Resurrection. That one actually looks like it might stick around for another season or so.
It might come back mid-season next year. I think we have covered TV.
We have covered TV pretty well. And I guess now we're at that point already, because the hour goes by so fast, where we can kind of, I guess, wrap things up and talk about who we are going to tip the cap to as we close out the week.
Mine's going to be kind of serious this week. I want to tip my cap to the staff at Methodist Hospital. They've been taking care of my mom for the last month, and they're an A-plus team there.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing an amazing job.
Man, that's got to feel good, where, a situation that serious, someone you care about that much, and you just know that they're in good hands.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be pretty great. So, yeah, very cool that you're tipping the cap to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to – last week I tipped the cap to you.
Yes.
Because we missed you.
Yes.
This week I'm going to kind of do the same in reverse and tip the cap to David.
Okay.
Because, David is facing one of the trials of fatherhood tonight, I think. You know what? And to him – maybe it might not even be that big of a deal, something he's prepared himself for, something he's expecting. I don't know. Maybe I'm making a bigger deal out of it than need be. But, like, I just imagined, like, from the moment that I had a daughter, like, those things were around the bend.
Right.
And, like, I just saw myself as, man, what am I going to do? Because you want to be that guy who's, like, sharpening knives and cleaning guns and different things. But then you also kind of, like, want them to feel like you're approachable and kind, and someone that they can make an investment in and not fear, and there's just like this whole weird dynamic, So David, kudos to you. I tip my cap to you because you are in one of those rounds. And other than that, anybody who you would expect David would like to tip his cap to if he were here?
David would probably tip his cap to his daughter.
Yes. So good luck, man. Good luck to you. Prom's a big deal. I didn't go to my prom. Did you go to prom?
No, I didn't.
I thought, because I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, and so I thought I could either ask a random girl to go to prom, and then I would spend all sorts of money on my tux and her corsage and getting transportation and dinner and all the stuff that a man is expected to pay for when he takes a woman to prom. And I thought, to me, that seemed like an investment with very little return, no matter how the night went.
I get that.
I thought I was going to get very little return. So I wanted to have something that would last for a while. I went out and spent $350 on like a TV. Like a brand new, it was like a 32-inch TV. And it was before flat screen, so it was one of those big tube TVs, very heavy.
Right.
And everything. But that TV is still in my brother's bedroom. And I took it to college with me, and I had like the biggest TV in the dorms. And
it was a good investment then.
It was a good investment. And you know what? When everybody else woke up the morning after prom and they, that was just a memory. And I got to enjoy my prom gift for a very long time. And then after the fact, someone else got to enjoy it too.
Yeah.
So, if you don't have a girlfriend or if you don't have a boyfriend or whatever, and you're out there and you hear the Culture and Arts podcast, and next year, prom's coming up or whatever, you should think about spending that money a little bit more wisely and seeing how far you can make it stretch.
Yeah, actually, my prom night, I just chose to stay home. I was never the most social guy, and I remember staying home and watching playoff hockey.
Have we brought that up on the show?
I think we have.
Playoff hockey on prom night.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, man, did your team win?
Yeah.
Works out. Until next week, until episode, 13?
Episode 13
Lucky
next
number
week.
13.
And hopefully all three of us will be here.
That would be fantastic, especially since 3 is in the title. It's,
right.
It's got some kind of cohesion. All right, to all of our listeners out there, we tip the cap to you, and we will see you next week.